have our KernCOG Public Workshop, National Center for Sustainable Transportation. Ms. Rodier. Is that you?
That is me.
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me here this evening. I am going to share some of the findings that have come from the study that you all supported and is being funded by the California Department of Transportation. All the 8 counties, all the 8 MPOs in the San Joaquin Valley supported this, and we have been looking at shared mobility options to transit in rural disadvantaged areas.
Can you speak into the mic a little bit closer,
Yeah,
Karen?
sure. Okay, so oops. How's this? So tonight I'm going to quickly just give you an overview of the project, some background terms on shared use mobility, findings and recommendations, and then I'm going to give you kind of a brief description of the proposed pilot project that we will hopefully be submitting on Monday for ARB funding, cap and trade funding. And there are 2 pilot areas in Kern County. Okay, so as many of you know, conventional transit is very effective in dense urban corridors. However, in rural areas like the San Joaquin Valley, long travel distances and low densities can make it very difficult to provide cost-effective transit. So, it's expensive. Because it's expensive, service can often be infrequent, and it's also hard to access. And we have some high poverty levels in certain areas of the valley. This can lead to low auto availability. And, as many of you know, many are unable to access jobs, healthcare, education, healthy food, and other basic services. So the project, as I mentioned before, it's a partnership between the eight San Joaquin Valley MPOs. Caltrans funded it. We're working with Michael Segala and then UC Davis. And the goal of this project is to identify pilot concepts and locations that leverage shared use mobility services and enhance rural disadvantaged mobility throughout the valley. So I'm just going to provide a few terms here right now. So there are all kinds of terms for shared mobility options. So we all know what we're talking about. So the first is ride sourcing. Many of you are probably familiar with Uber and Lyft type services. This is a taxi-like service that uses a single passenger. Typically it's with a single passenger and a driver. It uses a smartphone is used to order a ride, and it's also available for payment. Okay, ride splitting. There are generally two types of ride splitting. Some of you may be familiar with Uber Pool and Uber Lyft. Those are services that kind of deviate off a route and will pick up another person, and you'll have a reduction in your fare. And then there are also kind of private drivers can be reimbursed for costs. So this is, for example, Waze, Carpool, and also some volunteer transportation organizations. And then car sharing, this is typically, and as I'm describing it for this project, is a short-term car rental. You could do it by a phone, website, smartphone. You check a car out at one location and you bring it back, so it's round-trip car sharing. And some of you may be familiar with Zipcar. Okay, so potential pilot service models and locations. Here I'm going to be kind of discussing the methods that we used in the first planning stage of this project and what some of our findings were for the San Joaquin Valley, but more specifically in Kern County. So we started out by identifying all the census tracts that had a Cal Enviro screen rating greater than the 75th percentile. So those are considered disadvantaged communities that could potentially be eligible for cap and trade funding to support initial pilot projects. And we also went through a process with all the MPO staff to identify areas that their county considered rural. So then we went through a process where we, for all these census tracts, we looked at the frequency and the quality of transit access from these census tracts that we had identified to major destination zones. So we went through that. We looked at the schedules and looked at Google Transit and looked at many of your reports. And then we looked at potential cost savings. So for these, origin census tracts to major destinations, we looked at what it's typically costing for a one-way trip for your transit agencies to provide that trip, and then what it would cost for Uber and Lyft to provide a ride sourcing trip. We use their fares with kind of Google Map data. And then also we estimated, what it would cost for car sharing. So basically, we were looking at where we could, where car sharing and ride sourcing could provide more affordable travel compared to existing transit services. For example, dial-a-ride and fixed route transit. So one area of where we found is there could be potentially some savings from ride sourcing and ride splitting for fixed route transit. And there were, you can see on there are a couple of areas for that fall into that for Kern County. So here we have, often the transit service in these areas are infrequent, and there is no walk access to the stops. They depend on dial-a-ride service. There are limited service hours and few passengers, but they have critical travel needs. But because of the long distances and the low densities surrounding the stops, it's quite expensive to provide the services. So I don't know if you can see that there. I'm having a hard time. But so so here we have some figures for, these are weighted averages for Kern in the Lamont and Arvin area, and also in Shafter and Wascow. And I looked at kind of estimated a high ride sourcing cost and a low ride sourcing cost, as well as what it might cost to ride split. And here, in these areas, I found that it could potentially be competitive with the per mile cost of providing transit right now. And just so that we're not alone in looking at these types of services, I'll just provide you with this example of a ride sourcing service in Pinellas County in Florida. So they have partnered with Uber and Lyft and a taxi company to provide kind of after-hour transit service, after-hour ride sourcing service for those who are shift workers. They work after, say the regular bus stops working, and they provided these trips for free in certain locations. So another type of kind of situation we found was where we found that there could be alternative to fixed route transit and dial-a-ride through car sharing. And you can see here frequently many of times these areas are further out from the urban areas, so they have it's more expensive to provide this transit service. We went through and looked at, how much affordable housing was available in these census tracts, and whether there might be a sufficient amount of affordable housing to host some car sharing type services. So we found a number of locations in Kern where it may be possible to host a car sharing type service in affordable housing complexes. In Lost Hills, Delano, Shafter, and Wascow, we found that could potentially bring some cost savings due to combined dial-a-ride and transit service, as well as Lamont and Arvin. So, and again, we're not alone in looking at these types of services. In Sacramento last week, they just began a car sharing project at some affordable housing complexes in downtown, in the kind of inner area of downtown Sacramento or the city of Sacramento. That's just started, and again, that was funded by cap and trade dollars. Denver, they have a car sharing program that's been going for a while now. They are able to continue their car sharing pilot. You know, they had some initial funding, but it's now self-sustaining in 4 of the initial 5 locations, because they're able to get full fare from non-disadvantaged residents and give some discount to some that are maybe more challenged. Okay, and this is actually a pretty exciting pilot project that's closer to home. This is in Needles, California, and this is Victor Valley Transit Authority. So they decided they wanted to try something different, and so they contracted with Enterprise Car Sharing, and they have 3 vehicles stationed outside the credit union. And they started, I think, with about a $35,000 revenue guarantee for, that's what Enterprise needed to make sure the vehicles were out there. And the program is still running and has a healthy, actually they haven't used much of their revenue, so it looks like it's largely self-sufficient so far. So it's been going since August 2016. So I think that's really promising. That's one of the most promising, program that's actually going on for rural transit. Okay, so we're madly right now working on this ARB grant for cap and trade funds. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of tell you about the specific pilot projects that we would like to launch in Kern County if we are funded. So basically we had all this data, and we came back to staff, and we started going through it and talking about kind of what passed, what seemed feasible, what seemed right about the data, what didn't, what problems they had, what didn't we understand. So we spent a lot of time, talking to the transit agencies, going back and forth. And we also had in mind, we were all working together thinking about potential funding sources. So together we kind of developed a kind of a set of what we thought were promising shared use mobility concepts, and some locations where we felt like there might be low-hanging fruit. So in Kern, we have selected 2 areas, Lamont and Wasco, to try this pilot concept, which I will now describe. Oops. There we go. Okay. So basically what we're proposing as part of this project is to install battery electric vehicles at affordable housing complexes in Lamont, Irvin, and Wasco. So there are 2 in each of those communities. So we are looking at initially installing 4 vehicles, and the grant would pay for the charging infrastructure. So what we would contract through a competitive bidding cycle for a car sharing organization that would basically supply the electric vehicles, provide all the insurance, take care of all the operational, things that need to be taken care of, like, ordering the rides, managing the reservation systems, all that sort of thing. And, like the Victor Valley transit situation, we would put up some kind of initial funding that would guarantee them a certain amount of revenue so they could supply the vehicles. So in addition to this, so we will have these car sharing vehicles. We also are interested in kind of recruiting people who live in these. Just to back up, this car sharing service will be available to the residents living in these communities, living in the housing complexes, but also the surrounding neighborhoods. So it won't be just for the affordable housing development. So as part of this, we want to also kind of layer in ride sourcing, a first and last mile ride sourcing service. So we're hoping to recruit people who could actually drive and make money through an Uber or Lyft type service, and they could go pick up people who lived in the surrounding communities where Dial-A-Ride typically provides services to get people to transit and get them to a transit station for the kind of the first and last mile. And in some situations, we may decide to open that up for ride sourcing for specific trip type needs, that are not someone can't get to through card sharing and ride sourcing. So if you ride source to the car sharing area and pick up a car sharing vehicle, or you're able to ride source and go to the transit station. So that is the concept. Yep. And so this is, I know I'm going through this quickly, and I'm almost out of time, but I think I can make it. So this is use of the pilot. So, we've got the housing complex, we've got the 4 vehicles, the recharging. I need to take my child to a medical appointment. What's the best way to get there? If I travel by ride sourcing all the way there and back, it would be $25. If I took a car share, it would be $15. If I did ride sourcing and transit, it would be $5. Okay, and this is just some site information. This is within 1 mile of the car sharing service. You can see there are quite a few potential users. And then this is a survey we conducted of where we're self-help industry is the developer for the low-income housing developments, and previously early 2017 we did a survey of all the self-help units in the valley, and we were able to see that it looked like people said if these types of services were available, they would use them. A good chunk of people would use them. So that's it. I think I have like a few minutes for questions. Yeah?
Yeah, how's this relate for disabled ADA or?
Okay,
like
so basically, in ADA services would continue. So in some areas, we're hoping that the car share and dial-a-ride could help reduce the need for dial-a-ride service among those that don't have to, say, for example, transport a wheelchair. But that type of service would still be ongoing because our service would not be able to transport a wheelchair. So, for example, in the Lamont-Arvin area, there's some thought that, if we do this pilot, and we show that we're reducing a significant amount of riders on the dial-a-ride, we're attracting those that don't need to transport a wheelchair, we could actually retire a dial-a-ride vehicle, and they're very expensive to run. They're some of the bigger, that's a huge problem throughout the valley. We found the high cost of the dial-a-ride, the high per trip cost.
So it's not a replacement system. It's in addition to.
That's right. Right now, it would be in addition to, because these vehicles are not equipped, so they would not meet the ADA requirements. You would still need at least one vehicle. That many in Lamont and Arvin, they have 2 vehicles that serve the area, so they have redundancy. So it may be possible to retire a vehicle, but that won't be happening as part of this pilot project.
Right.
So we're going to see if it works well
Great.
enough.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
But potentially, Caroline, especially with Kern Transit, if it is successful, it could, say, replace a fixed route, right? Isn't that the goal, to see if this is an option to replace a fixed route?
To Wasco, it may be able to replace a fixed route or reduce the demand. The big savings come from the dial-a-ride.
Okay.
So that's why we selected the communities who really showed early promise, and had potential savings from dial-a-ride, because that was kind of the biggest bang for the buck early on, safest.
And you've actively been working with Bob Neath from Kern Transit and with the city manager and staff from Wasco, correct?
Yes.
Thank you
I
very
just
much.
want to thank all the staff. You guys have been really great and very patient with me. So as we've worked together to develop this concept.
Cheryl, I have a question.
Okay.
I just, most of the Lyft and Uber rides are either app and credit card?
Yeah,
How do you get
yeah.
around, because you're serving the underserved community? A lot of them don't have access to credit cards or,
Yeah.
or debit cards. Does it work because of the housing that they're at, that it's tied to where they live? Or, I mean, how do you
We're
get
gonna have to
around
work
that?
out. I know right now there's a pilot project that's being funded by the Federal Transit Administration, and they're trying to work on different ways where they can do it for they can provide ways to pay without having a bank account. But yeah, that is something we're gonna have to work out as part of the design of the project. We'll probably design the project for 1 year and install all the infrastructure, and the second year will be operational.
And with the combination of the ride sourcing and the transit, where it seems to be the lowest fee here, would there be able to be anything worked into the grant, or where the transit agency can offer vouchers to people to use the Uber Lyft for that last mile? That way they're encouraged to use it as a multimodal, instead of just taking it to one destination.
Okay, your transit is pretty affordable in this region, and the grant allows us to pay subsidies to reduce the ride-sharing costs, so to encourage people through lower costs initially to use the service. We're hoping it'll be self-sustaining, especially the car sharing, but I don't know. I mean, that would be fine if the transit agencies wanted to do that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's call our KernCOG meeting to order. Please stand for the salute. Pledge of allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Ortiz? Here. Bob Smith?
I'm here.
Wood? Pasquale? Here. Mock? McFarland? Here. Bauer?
Here.
Kraut? Yes. Pryor? Here. Bill Smith? Wigman?
Here.
Scribner? Miller?
Here.
Para?
Here.
Kiernan?
Item number 3, public comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the committee on any matter not on this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the committee. Committee members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff or factual information, or request staff to report back to the committee at a later meeting. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. With the authority of the chair to extend the time limit is deemed appropriate for conducting the meeting. Please state your name and address for the record prior to making a presentation. Do we have any public comments?
Good evening, Lieutenant Ian Silva, Kern County Sheriff's Office. Just wanted to stop by and deliver an update on our KernCOG litter removal contract. We're wrapping up this is our 3rd contract with KernCOG, and we're wrapping up this, we've got about a month and a half left for this current contract cycle. Since we started this current cycle in July of 2016, we've covered over 120 job sites, about 295 miles with this particular road crew. We've put in about 946 hours worth of detention deputy time. If you add the inmates, typically it's a 6 inmate crew. When you add the inmates' man hours in, it adds up to about 5,676 man hours of labor. I say about, but my staff seems to want to get really specific with the numbers there. We estimate that the savings in terms of labor here is about $160,000. $160,187 if you translate that into labor hours. And some of the areas we've more recently been in is, of course, the Bakersfield area. We've been in Delano, McFarland, Shafter, Wasco. We've been into Arvin. Of course, over the entire contract period, we've been in quite a few areas in the county. As I usually like to state, if a council member from a given city or staff member wants to have us focus on a particular area, be happy to coordinate that through my office. KernCOG staff knows how to get in touch with me. I have business cards. I'm on the sheriff's website. We'll be happy to target a particular area if there's a problem area. If it's one that we can is within our purview and within our area of operation, we'll be happy to get there as soon as we can coordinate a team. Unless there are any questions, I'll go ahead and finish up.
Any questions from the board?
Does this have to be in the county or can it be in the city?
We generally have to operate within the county bounds.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other public comments? Seeing none. Item number 4, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by KernCOG staff and will be approved by one motion if no member of the committee or public wishes to comment or ask questions. If comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in the listed sequel with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the committee concerning the item before action is taken. Do we have any questions on the consent calendar? We have items A through L.
Move to approve?
Second.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Pascual,
Yes.
McFarland,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Trout,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Wakeman,
Yes.
Para.
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 5, TDA Biennial Appointment Report. Mr. Snoddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to bring this report to you again. This is a second report for this fiscal year, and the purpose of this report is just to give all the community a heads up and a snapshot look at our TDA balances for the entire KernCOG distribution for a regional report. And if you look, you can find your community on page 3. It's a score sheet on how we've worked with your community. We have currently 3 agencies that we're working closely with to bring their TDA accounts to currency. But right now, I think this has been this is the second report towards the end of the fiscal year, so we can get everybody a last chance to file their claims before we go dark in August. I'd like to get as many claims passed in the May or June time period. And this is just an information item. If you have any questions, please let me know.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Snoddy? No? Thank you. Item number 6, scoping meeting, notice of preparation of a program environmental impact report, EIR, for 2018 Regional Transportation Plan. Mr. Ball.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. KernCOG is the lead agency for producing its environmental impact report on the Regional Transportation Plan, which we update right now every 4 years. There has been a notice of preparation for the release of our environmental impact report scoping meeting and comment period. During the scoping meeting, which we are having tonight, KernCOG must solicit views from the local, state, and federal agencies and the public as to the scope and content of the environmental issues to be included in the environmental impact report. The project location, description, and expected scope of environmental analysis is described in the notice of preparation, which is attached in your document and on the kerncog.org website. And comment period will close for this on May 30th. At this time, I'd like to request that you open the public hearing.
I will open the public hearing. Do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none. Any comments from the board? None? I will close the public hearing.
Thank you.
So are we voting on this or what? That's it? Board member meeting reports, none. Caltrans report. Gail, you're back.
Okay, good evening. Let's start off with the Cherry Avenue truck climbing lanes. That is on Highway 119 near Taft from Elk Hills Road to Tupin Road. Construction is 95% done. Caltrans, though, is still working with California Department of Fish and Wildlife to get the permit to work on the south side drainage systems. Otherwise, we're in pretty good shape and wrapping that project up. The Shafter-Wasco ADA ramps, that is on State Route 43 in Shafter and Wasco. It's a SHOP project and an ADA project. Caltrans has started construction and is expected to continue through August of this year. The Kern Avenue pedestrian overcrossing, that's to do ADA compliance. Upgrades on the State Route 99 in Kern County at the Kern Avenue pedestrian overcrossing. It's a SHOP project for Caltrans. Construction is about 40% complete. Removal of existing PUC started, but waiting for final approval from the railroad to complete demolition of the existing overcrossing over the railroad. The Delano Roundabout at State Route 155 in Browning, also a SHOP project for Caltrans. The project was awarded, and the contractor has a 90-day delay start. So we anticipate the construction will start at the end of the school year. The project is located near the high school. Utility companies, though, are doing some relocation until the contractor starts. Famosa, 43 and 99 Bridge. The project was awarded on May 5th to the lowest bidder, which was SEMA Construction. Construction expected to start before the end of the year due to restrictions to replace the existing culvert in the Laredo Canal. So there's a little bit of a delay there. Kern County seismic restoration, State Route 99 Airport Drive overcrossing and Golden State Avenue. We are at 80% complete. They anticipate the contractor being done by the end of next month, and then they're going to move into what they call plant establishment for 1 year. And that concludes my report, unless there's any questions or concerns.
Any questions for Caltrans from the board, from the public? Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Executive Director's Report.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and board members. I'd like to thank several of you for what happened yesterday at the CTC meeting. Mayor Wegman, Council Member Pasquale, Dean Flores was involved, Melissa Poole with the wonderful company, former Congressman Thomas, Caltrans staff, as well as KernCOG staff. It looks like we are going to be successful in finishing Route 46. That project has been underway from the San Luis Obispo County line, working towards I-5 for well over 15 years. Those of you who've been around that long. Next month, we hopefully, with Caltrans' help, we'll go back to the CTC near the end of June, and we were able to secure approximately $10 million in additional dollars to finish that project. By the end of next month, maybe we can get about another $10 million. But thank you all for your help over the last month. It has helped. I've talked to many of the CTC commissioners and staff yesterday. They got the message that that is an important project, not just for our region, but but for the state and for the entire Central Valley. So thank you all for your help. It did pay off.
Thank you, Aaron.
Also, at the CTC meeting yesterday, City of Bakersfield, who I attended the meeting with, received over $1 million in an ATP project that was for A Street between Brundage Lane and San Amadeo Street. May 25th, mark your calendars, and please let your staffs know, the CMAC and RSTP call for projects workshop. The deadline is August 31st. May 26th, there'll be an environmental justice meeting. We think there'll be a video feed in Shafter, is that right? Yes. Okay. In your folders, you'll see something with the U.S. Senate letterhead on it. I've been asked to testify to a Senate subcommittee on the impacts of air quality regulations on transportation, and Robert will be joining me, and I think one of the reasons we were picked was because we are a very well-respected COG, and we clearly have air quality issues here, and that message will be to the United States Senate, who are considering changes to air quality rules, which we certainly support. As I mentioned earlier, the next CTC meeting is June 28th and 29th. We will have staff there, and at that meeting, the CTC will make the decision on exactly how much money they will fund the Route 46 project. So there is some additional information on SB1 in your folders, and later on this evening I'll go over the other things that are in your folder. But part of the CTC meeting was a little bit of a love fest over SB1. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, so now we will go, do we have any member statements? Any member statements? No? All right, let's go into the agenda for Kern Council of Governments. Roll call. You want to just, okay, as it is. Item number 2, public comments. Do we have any public comments for the Kern Council of Government agenda? Seeing none. The consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial by KernCOG staff and will be approved by one motion if no member of the council or public wishes to comment or ask questions. Do we have any public or board comments on the consent agenda?
I believe there are people here who would like item I pulled off the consent agenda. Is that item I, if you would
Item
please
I,
pull that.
like pull item I? Any other items? Lori? We need a motion for consent.
Move approval.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Pascual,
Yes.
McFarland,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Crouch,
Yes.
Fire,
Yes.
Wigman.
Yes. Okay, item I, KernCOG Overall Public Outreach Plan, Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. 2 months ago, back in March, your board authorized that staff should let out a request for proposals to both private and nonprofit contractors for a sustained public outreach campaign regarding regional transportation issues. So this is different than, for example, the workshops that we're undergoing right now for the RTP, which tend to be more cyclical, and limited in term. This would be an ongoing, potentially recurring contract, similar to work that the Kern Transportation Foundation has in the past conducted, not necessarily on KernCOG's behalf necessarily, but in terms of promoting transportation and its benefits generally. So this particular RFP, we estimated a $30,000 budget with a heavy emphasis on face-to-face meetings with stakeholder organizations throughout the region. We had 3 contractors who proposed by the April 29th deadline, including the Kern Transportation Foundation, a private company known as Regional Government Services, and Bike Bakersfield. Importantly, in this situation, KernCOG staff requested assistance from its sister COGs north of us in the San Joaquin Valley to conduct the evaluation process, and we received volunteers from 4 of our sister COGs: Fresno, Tulare, Merced, and San Joaquin. And they were sent our evaluation forms, given our methodology and processes, and came back with a recommendation for Regional Government Services, which includes all elements. Their proposal includes all elements mentioned in the RFP, including travel-related expenses built in for 20 meetings throughout the region. So accordingly, we are recommending contracting with RGS for this sustained public education campaign in an amount not to exceed $29,720. And that is my report. I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
So we have any comments from the public?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Gary Blackburn. I'm the chairman of the Kern Transportation Foundation. I'm honored to be here. At the KTF, we have several issues with this decision process and the company selected. Number one, the process itself was done by an out-of-town committee, group of committees, and as Robert explained, different COGs that he mentioned. But from what I understand, it's a major deviation from KernCOG's standard operating procedure to outsource that outside of the Kern County area. That group does not understand necessarily who the KTF is, the fact that we have a 25-year history of being the outreach group, or it doesn't even know about Bike Bakersfield for that matter. They don't know the dynamics or the decision makers here. Number two, this out-of-town company, I've done a little research on it. Regional Government Services, RGS, I'm told, is a state government agency and a joint powers authority based in Carmel. And so I was surprised to see that a public entity was competing in the private sector. Number three, and I respect Robert Phipps personally and professionally, but we exchanged emails this last week, and we were talking about the price of the contract, and he said that the cost differential in this contract was not a factor. So I want to know when did the cost quit becoming a factor on a contract? That's always a factor. Number three, the printing costs. Now we included our printing costs included in that cost. It was all-inclusive cost, and that included printing. I understand RGS was their price plus printing. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's what I was told. Also, their consultants in their proposal are being paid about $150 an hour. We have 3 very high quality, qualified, well-known people that we've contracted with, if we win the contract, that would earn a whole lot less than that. So you figure the trips that they would make from Carmel Valley down here, the hotels, gas, time, they're going to front load that into the contract. And if you compound that with the $150 an hour cost, you're going to get a whole lot less bang for your buck than if you stay with somebody in Kern County. Also, the idea of $30,000 leaving this county and going up to Monterey County is something that my members are really against also. I mean, it's just, we need the money in this county. So because of those reasons and others, I ask that we continue this item until next month, to where the board members can have a chance to do a little more investigation, do their own research, and maybe come back and talk about it again. I thank you.
Good evening, Chair. My name's Troy Hightower, and I have a few additional comments to make about this item. I do support some of the concerns that were raised about local. Our understanding of this RFP was to develop an educational program on transportation, why transportation is vital to Kern County, what kind of projects are going on now and planned in the future. However, the contract that has been drafted really is more about researching transportation funding and funding sources, the way I read it. And so at the time this came out, a lot of people were interested in how we could maybe come up with a tax measure or ways to support a tax measure to fund some transportation projects. However, SB1 came along fairly quickly and rapidly, and the state has done a lot of what would have resulted in a tax measure here. So for that reason, I'm not sure if this whole project and, you know, spending time and money looking at transportation funding sources is as relevant now because of SB1. If SB1 didn't pass, I could definitely see that. I agree with Robert Phipp's comment that this was the kind of work that KTF has been known for doing, and I appreciate that and agree completely. On the selection criteria and scoring, we had requested that information, and we received the blank scoring form, but not the actual scoring. So we'd like to know how our score was on that proposal. And also, as Gary mentioned, we were told that all costs related to this project had to be bared by the proposer, and it had to be within $30,000. So when we saw the contract that includes, it states that KernCOG will be paying for some of the costs of this contract, we were a little startled to see that. And if we would have known that, I think we could have put in a more attractive bid. So with that, that's all the comments I'd like to make at this time. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Madam Chair, my name is John, and members of the board. My name is John Spalding, and I represent the Building and Construction Trades Council, but I am also a member of the COG board. I'm not as versed as to the details of the application. I know the process. I was made aware of it. We have not had a board meeting to even discuss it any further. And as I look around the room, I see other members of Kern Transportation Foundation in front of me. I would really like to concur in Gary's recommendation that we postpone this a month, give us a chance to reevaluate, and give yourselves a chance to reevaluate. We are in competition. It looks like Mike Bakersfield is from here, understand the community. We're from here and understand the community, and yet we're competing with what I'm hearing to now that it's another government agency, so or somewhat. So I again would like to concur in the fact that we postpone the decision on this for 1 month so that we can get more information. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Oh, another one. Excuse me.
Good evening, Madam
Hello,
Chair,
Howard.
board members. My name is Howard Silver. I was privileged to be a member of this board for, I don't care to mention how many years, but I also serve on the KTF. Everything that you heard from Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Hightower, that carries a lot of weight and a lot of meaning. As a business person, just as a business person, trying to understand what happens when you outsource like that on a local project with local people with local knowledge doesn't really make good business sense to me. Now, that's my opinion. Obviously, it's shared by many others. And I feel that everything that Mr. Phipps said tonight, I have no problem with. I mean, that's the way it was done. But it would seem to me that, you know, $30,000 might not sound like a big deal when you're talking millions and millions of dollars of your budget, but, you know, every dollar counts. And if it could stay in this county and help this county, I think that's the route you should go. And I ask that you remove it from the agenda, have some more time to think about it. Let KTF, now that we have a better understanding of the changes that were made, come back and we'll go from there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Okay. Any comments from the board? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask staff, the request for proposals or any, I mean, being out of town, does that make any difference or?
There was no factor. There is no official policy in KernCOG's procedures manual or procurement with regard to procurement that favors a local operation over another one. Now, in the past, there has been some practice of that, mostly on the basis of like office supplies, those kinds of things, because there aren't too many locally based or headquartered like planning firms and so forth that would compete for contracts that KernCOG typically offers. The reference to the cost differentials among the three were not that considerable. $30,000 again. You see where I don't, to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact dollar amount that KTF came in. Where they came in, but it was within the vicinity, and the printing issue, we anticipated that the printing would be quite nominal, quite frankly, because the emphasis here is on face-to-face meetings. So we did not see a huge expenditure, with regard to printing. We have a color printer in-house. We did not see a huge expenditure with regard to printing some brochures that would go along with the face-to-face meetings or anything like that. So that was not really a major consideration as well in terms of cost.
But all the face-to-face meetings will, no matter who we choose for this contract, will be held in Kern County.
Yes.
What about the concern that it's a governmental agency? Any response to that?
That I'm not aware of. I would have to research that myself. That was not my understanding at all.
Well, yeah. Regional Government Services is a joint powers agency. They're governed by a board that is made up of city managers from several cities in Monterey County and the Bay Area. They are, and KernCOG is a joint powers agency. So RGS, according to their website, assists cities and government agencies like ours with the things that we are asking them to do. This is the exact type of work that organization does. It's not a state agency. They are an agency made up of city and local governments that are based in Carmel Valley.
Does staff see any reason why we shouldn't move forward from what we've heard?
No, and if I can add a few more things, we did deviate from our normal process where we would typically evaluate these proposals on our own, and the reason why we deviated from that process is members of our own board are part of KTF and are also part of Bike Bakersfield. Mayor Prout, Councilmember Ortiz, Supervisor Couch, you, Councilmember Smith, and Cindy Para are all associated with firms that have applied to do this work. I made a conscious decision to have the proposals evaluated by people who I trusted from outside the agency to avoid the known conflict of interest that we did have. I trust their decision. I trust that the evaluation was done fairly. I've gone over this with our council. Professional services, as you know, Councilmember Smith, as a professional engineer, are evaluated not on cost, but on the ability to do the completed work. All the firms were fully qualified that submitted, but the federal procurement process requires us to evaluate the RFPs and pick not just someone who is fully qualified, but the best qualified applicant. And costs are typically a secondary consideration. Qualifications, experience, and ability to complete the work are what is evaluated, not cost. It's not like when you bid on construction contract to do work where you take the low bidder. Professional services are not awarded to low bidders. They're awarded to the best qualified applicant. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And if I may, Madam Chairwoman, the question of the differential that Mr. Hightower referred to in terms of not having received the actual evaluation forms, we're happy to make those public. I did inform Mr. Blackburn that the scoring differential was about 20 points, roughly 250 to 270, as I recall. But we are happy to make the actual evaluation forms public as well. That's no problem.
One more thing, Madam Chair and Councilmember Smith. Mr. Hightower brought it up whether this contract is even still needed. That is certainly an option that the council can take tonight. Is we do not have to award this this contract. We have typically done most of this work ourselves. The reason we went down this path is to make sure, first of all, that we complied with federal guidelines when we award contracts. We had not been doing that on this contract in the past. Can KernCOG complete our mission and do the required outreach that we need to do without any assistance? The answer to that question is yes. So this is not an essential contract. It will not stop us from doing our mission. You could elect not to award it at all if you wanted to. But my recommendation and the staff's recommendation is that we award it to RGS.
Thank you. I think to continue educating the community on the importance of transportation is important, and so I will move staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Mr. McFarland. So is this a voice vote or a roll call vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? There it is. Thank you. Item number 4, final FY 2017-18 Kern Council of Governments Financial Plan Budget Adoption. Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, I decided not to play musical chairs as much as go on with tonight. Before you is KernCOG's final 2017-18 financial plan, which you have seen. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you. Tonight before you is the 2017-2018 KernCOG financial plan, which this is the third time it has come before you. You're seeing a financial plan that has fortunately a slight surplus with almost 4.6 million in estimated revenues and about 4.5 million in operating capital expenditures. Because we are asking for you to adopt this tonight, it does require a public hearing. So at this time, subject to any questions, I would ask the chairwoman to open the public hearing.
I will open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public? Do we have any comments from the board? I will close the public hearing.
Thank you. So the action tonight is to adopt KernCOG's financial plan for 2017-18, which is, hand in hand with our overall work program, which you included in the consent calendar.
I would move to adopt the financial plan.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving right along. Kern Motorist Aid Authority.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Tonight, again, for the third time, you have in front of you the Kern Motorist Aid Authority financial plan. This is the budget that pays for our call box network, our litter cleanup activities, and the Kern 511 traffic information service. Again, as noted earlier, this too has not changed in the preceding months or since the preceding months, with revenues expected of about $733,000, operating expenses of a little over $1 million, that result in an operating deficit of nearly $300,000 that will be covered by cash reserves on hand. So again, subject to any questions, this also requires a public hearing, and we're asking the chairwoman to open the public hearing at this time.
I will open the public hearing. Do we have any comments from the public? Do we have any comments from the board? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
And the action tonight is to adopt the 17-18 Kern Motor State Authority financial plan.
So move.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item B, agreement for safety-related hazard and obstruction removal on state highways. Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So we're asking for the board to consider renewing, as you heard earlier under public comment. The Sheriff's Department is completing its third year contract for litter removal throughout the county. The service seems to be appreciated by the communities. You know, the cost has been held down and kept at a pretty steady rate over the last 3 years. So we have before you a new MOA for $50,000 that covers one more year of countywide service. And it's important to note that we believe next month you should have another contract in front of you specifically for the city of Bakersfield and its Keep Bakersfield Beautiful and homeless shelter program.
Okay, any comments from the board?
I just think it's a great program, and we'd love to continue it, so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Good for you. Item C, status of the Kern Motors Aid Authority's call box program. Mr. Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm still here. So tonight we wanted to update you. I'm going to find the item here. We wanted to update you on our, thank you, on the status of the call box program because you had requested back in March, I believe, that we look at, we consider one of a couple of different options, either eliminating the entire call box network or only maintaining about the top 10 or 20 call boxes in terms of call volumes throughout the region. And so we have been working on this. We have not gotten all the information yet from the vendor that we would like in terms of the degree of specificity, but what we do know is that they are open to working with us on a much smaller network. However, it will not be, the contract terms obviously will be considerably different. It would be a strict time and materials contract. So the issue there is the distance between the call boxes. If you recall from, I don't know if you can, a couple of months ago, we provided you a list of the top, I think it was the top 20, and specifically even just the top 5 were on, I think 3 different routes, a considerable distance from each other. And so while our vendor is indicating a willingness to maintain, a considerably reduced system, the travel time, we would be paying for the travel time between the boxes in the event of any kind of problems or knockdowns, those kinds of events. And there may be additional requirements we're going to have to research, in terms of signage or to let people know where the call boxes are if they're not going to be on a regular route schedule, I guess, of every 2 miles in the rural area. Every 2 miles in the rural areas and every mile in the urban. So we're going to have to research that a little bit. Of course, the other option would be to remove the network completely, which is entirely possible. By way of cost, in 2015, when we removed several boxes, more than 100 boxes throughout the region, specifically though in Metro Bakersfield, we paid about $237 per unit to remove them. Now that's just the pole and the box. It does not include the cost for storage, and it does not include the concrete pad that in some cases have been improved with handlebars or ADA accessibility that we may have to address as well. So those, subject to your questions, the staff report includes a listing of the remaining call boxes in terms of route, how many boxes are on each route. We've gone from about a high of about 574 boxes to about 462 now, which adds up to roughly a 20% reduction in the entire network from its peak in the mid-1990s. So subject to your questions, that concludes my report.
Let me add, please, Madam Chair. In addition to negotiating with our vendor, we are negotiating and in discussions with Caltrans and CHP. So Caltrans has a say in this, so does CHP. We initially thought that they would not be open to keeping a small number of boxes. They have said they're open to it, but have not completely agreed to it yet. The process of getting some options in front of the board, either take them all out or keep us a handful or a few handfuls, will likely take several more months. That's the bottom line.
And tonight you, on the consent calendar, you approved a 6-month, as we discussed back in March, you approved a 6-month extension of the existing maintenance contract with Case as we get all this sorted out.
Okay.
So that gives us until December, until the end of the year, of the calendar year, to find out which way we're going to go.
Any questions for Mr. Phipps?
I have a comment. Do we have any vandalism going on those at the present time?
Can you turn on your microphone, sir?
Do we have any
knowledge about vandalism?
What we routinely deal with, are what we call the knockdowns, and sometimes that's what that is vandalism. In other occasions, it's a genuine accident. Somebody will back up into one or swerve and accidentally hit one. But oftentimes we found that it is strictly a matter of vandalism, and in those cases, because it's cellular technology, the call box actually sends out a distress call. Help me, I've fallen, I can't get up, and that goes to the CHP, which more or less automatically begins an investigation, and so they will attempt to hunt down whoever. It's like, well, you've got bits of plastic on your windshield, we've got you. So real law and order stuff.
Yeah, but Councilmember Ortiz and the rest of the board, we also do occasionally have the signs that are associated with the boxes graffiti too.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
I have a comment, but the 10 or 20 that we're going to leave possibility or take them all down, has any numbers changed on those, or still consistent what you reported last time?
Do you mean in terms of call volumes or
call volume?
To be honest, council member, I have not checked in the last month. I have not checked the numbers, but the numbers that we gave you back in March represented a full year, so I would not imagine that we've seen significant difference in that time.
But what we will bring back to you, council member, and the rest of the board, is we won't make our decision just on the last year. We will give you much more data about, and a recommendation based on several years worth of data. We have multiple years of data on the calls, so we we won't make a recommendation based on any anomalies in that data. So if there's over time, if say the box on this post mile on the Grapevine has always been our highest used box, we will let you know that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Executive Director's Report.
Good evening again, Madam Chair. I apologize for my voice. I have a little bit of a cold. Tomorrow, I believe, is Bike to Work Day. Is that correct? I'm sure Councilmember Smith and Ms. Parra can comment on that. This weekend, I will be attending, as well as I think Mayor Wegman, at one of our RTP workshops this Saturday in Wasco, I believe 1 p.m.
1 to 3.
1 to 3. May 24th, we'll be having a workshop in Bakersfield. If you're interested, it's at 2424 Cottonwood Road on the 24th. Please call the office for information. May 26th will be the Air Resources Board Environmental Justice Advisory Committee meeting that I mentioned before. There'll be a teleconference location in Shafter. May 30th, there will be an RTP workshop in Tehachapi. You can contact the COG for information on that. May 31st, there'll be another RTP workshop in Mojave about getting back to Bike Awareness Month. KGE TV Channel 17 will be excuse me, will be running 4 public service announcements for Commute Kern's new bike and pedestrian safety video. We will be adding additional workshops for those that may be interested in any of your communities that we haven't come out to yet. If you remember, we did not get we did not get complete coverage of every community within the county. So if you know any other organizations that may be willing to help or may want to go into some of the smaller communities, please let us know. Please remember, we will be dark in August, and in your folders this evening, unfortunately, 6 people have died on an intersection that many of us use. Although it's outside of Kern County, many of us are very familiar with it, and we are certainly working with Caltrans and San Luis Obispo COG to do whatever we can to improve the intersection of 46 and 41. There's a copy of the presentation we heard at 6 p.m. tonight, an article from last Friday's Bakersfield Californian, a new phone roster. If you have called the office in the last few months, you know we switched our phone system to an electronic phone system. These are all the direct dial numbers to all of our employees, or the extension if you want to go through the phone tree. The letter I mentioned earlier from the Senate asking me to testify next week. A summary of SB1 that was given to the CTC commissioners yesterday. A timeline of the next 4 months. And some statistics on electric vehicles in town. And I thought I may have missed, but I think there's a, oh yeah, I may have missed the schedule of cash disbursements, which is in there also, and the City of Bakersfield monthly trip report. And as some of you may have seen in today's Bakersfield California, there was a ribbon cutting yesterday that was attended by Councilmember Smith and other council members from Bakersfield, also the Mayor of Bakersfield, and Robert, I believe, offered some remarks there. Thank you for all that attended that project, and that project has been about at least 15 years in the making. So congratulations to Bakersfield for completing that project. That's all I have this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Aaron. Any member statements?
No, thank you.
No?
I just have a couple on the 178 ribbon cutting. Thank the COG and all the work that they've done over the 15 years, and appreciate it. And that's a great addition to Northeast Bakersfield to have that opened up. Yeah, it was a continuation of the Fairfax Crossing, the Morning Drive Crossing, and now all the way out. So appreciate that. And if anybody needs a bike buddy tomorrow, I'm open, and I'll be more than happy to ride bikes with you to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess this meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.